have consecrated it far above our powers to add or to detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work that they have thus far so nobly carried on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The immediate response was lukewarm. It wasn't until days later that the press acknowledged the powerful 2-minute speech. The war dragged along. Men on both sides continued to die, and Lincoln was anxious to end the bloodshed and devastation. The presidential election of 1864 was Lincoln's new worry. He wanted to be re-elected. In June, he was nominated for a second term. Lincoln felt that if he were elected, this would be a mandate from the people that they supported the emancipation of the slaves. The Democrats nominated General George B. McClellan. His campaign revolved around Lincoln's failure to end the war. Lincoln defeated McClellan by a large margin. The people had shown their support to the man who had dedicated himself to creating a better life. Union troops were experiencing success, and General William Sherman advanced from Tennessee into Georgia. On Christmas Day, Sherman captured Savannah. The end of the war was close at hand. As the end came in sight, an awkward question was raised. What shall we do with Jefferson Davis if we catch him? Lincoln's response was, if Grant could let Jefferson Davis escape, all unbeknown to himself, he was to let him go. I didn't want him. This turned out to be the best advice because the country had no use for Davis when he was caught. Late in March 1865, the president decided to take a short vacation, the first since he entered the White House in 1861. With a few friends, he went to City Point on the James River, where Grant had his headquarters. General Sherman came up for a meeting. The two generals were confident that the end of the war was near, but they were also certain that there must be at least one more great battle. Avoid this if possible, said the president. No more bloodshed. No more bloodshed. On the second day of April, both Richmond and Petersburg were evacuated. The president was determined to see Richmond and started out under the care of Admiral Porter. Very few people knew of Lincoln's arrival into Richmond. It was only 36 hours since Jefferson Davis had fled, having set fire to the city, and the fire was still burning. Lee surrendered on the 9th of April, and Grant knew that it was just a matter of a few days when there would be a total surrender. On Good Friday, April 14th, the newspapers throughout the North published an order of the Secretary of War stopping the draft and the purchase of arms and ammunition. The government had decreed that at 12 o'clock noon, the Stars and Stripes should be raised above Fort Sumter. Lincoln told everybody that I've never been so happy in my life in the week following Lee's surrender. Lincoln was uplifted. The war had ended, and the Emancipation Proclamation would give countless people a better life. He would be able to put his energy towards Reconstruction. Lincoln was also concerned as to Mary's mental well-being. She had been criticized throughout the years in Washington for overspending on her wardrobe and furnishings for the White House. She never hesitated to speak her mind, regardless of the consequences for her husband, and most tragically, the loss of her child. Lincoln told Mary, "We must both be more cheerful in the future. We have both been very miserable." Lincoln had begun to relax. He spent time with his son Tad, and his oldest son Robert was back from the war, spending a week with the family before going back to his studies at Harvard. Robert had been a member of Grant's staff and was able to give his father a first-hand account of the surrender. President Lincoln and Mrs. Lincoln were invited to attend a performance of Our American Cousin. They first asked General and Mrs. Grant to attend with them. It was published in the newspaper that they would be seeing the play, but at the last minute, the Grants went to Philadelphia. Their son Robert declined, saying he was too tired to go. The Lincolns then invited Major Henry Reed Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris, to sit in their box. Lincoln had never been comfortable with having bodyguards around him. During the height of the war, he only had one bodyguard. But Lincoln's mood had changed from elation to depression. He told his bodyguard the night of the performance that he believed he would be assassinated. Lincoln's assassination had been planned for months in advance. John Wilkes Booth, a 26-year-old actor, was the mastermind in the plot to assassinate Lincoln, Grant, and Seward. Earlier that evening, Wilkes met with his accomplices, Lewis Payne, George A. Asderot, David E. Harrell, John Surratt, and Edward Spangler at the Herndon House to review the plans to kill Secretary of State Seward and Lincoln. Wilkes would personally kill Lincoln. Sometime after 10 o'clock, Booth entered the theater and went to Lincoln's box. The guard who was to protect the president had taken a seat in the theater to watch the play. Lincoln was unaware that he had been left unguarded. Booth entered the president's box, drew his pistol, and fired just behind the president's head. It struck him behind the left ear, went through his brain, and exited behind the right eye. Rathbone struggled with Booth, but Booth was able to escape. Booth leaped from the box, but his spur caught in a flag which draped the presidential box. He broke his leg, but was able to stand and hobble away. In a dramatic move, Booth screamed to the crowd, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus ever to tyrants, the motto of Virginia, and before the audience realized what truly had happened, he escaped. Dr. Charles Augustus Leal was seated a close distance from the president and offered his assistance. When he realized that the president was near death, he was moved to a boarding house across the street from the theater. There were 3 more doctors in the audience, and the 4 physicians attempted to make the president as comfortable as possible. Lincoln lingered throughout the night. Mary Lincoln was joined by the Surgeon General, members of the cabinet, Robert Lincoln, and Charles Sumner, senator from Massachusetts. Vice President Andrew Johnson had arrived to see the dying president, but had to leave after a few minutes because Mrs. Lincoln wanted to see her husband, and Johnson and Mrs. Lincoln had mutual feelings of disdain, and it was agreed upon that this was not the time for a confrontation. Lincoln died the following morning, the 15th of April, at 7:22. That same evening, Seward was attacked while lying in his bed. His throat had been slashed. He had been injured on April 5th from a carriage accident when his horse bolted and Seward had to jump from the out-of-control carriage. His right arm had been broken and his jaw fractured. There was no evidence to link the accident with a death threat he had been given on March 12th. Lewis Payne entered Seward's home at 10 o'clock on the evening of Good Friday. Seward's son Frederick tried to prevent Payne from entering his father's room, but was beaten. Payne entered the room, attacked the male nurse, and struck Seward's daughter, Fanny. Payne jumped out of the bed and began slashing Seward's face and throat. Seward's other son, Major Augustus Seward, came into the room and struggled with Payne. Payne was able to escape only after he had bloodied 5 men. All the men were apprehended. It took 12 days to capture Booth and Harrell, who had been hidden by Confederate sympathizers. Harrell surrendered. Stanton had given orders that Booth was to be brought back alive. Sergeant Boston Corbett was overcome with emotion when he spotted Booth, and he shot him. John Wilkes Booth's last words were to his mother, "Tell my mother I died for my country, and I did what I thought was best." The conspirators were tried by a military commission who determined that there were 8 conspirators, including Mary Surratt, who ran a boarding house where Confederate spies frequented. Harrell, Azarat, Payne, and Surratt were hung. They voted life imprisonment for Dr. Samuel Mudd, Samuel Arnold, Michael O'Laughlin, and 6 years of hard labor for Edmund Spangler. Lincoln was the first president to be assassinated. It is a sad testimonial for a man who was dedicated to his country and had a profound love for all mankind. Washington mourned its president for almost a full week before the funeral train left the station for its slow journey back to Lincoln's home in Springfield. Mourners lined the railroad track at all hours of the day to get a glimpse of the train that carried their beloved friend. The man who at the end of the war addressed an Indiana regiment on March 17, 1865, and said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations."